urgency and the positivity, particularly the positivity around the debate, has been missing. It's been very negative. Understandably, it's such a large issue that everyone feels completely overwhelmed.
The heavy oak doors of Westminster swung open on January 29, 2026. Inside, members of Parliament gathered for what would become one of the most explosive sessions in modern British history. Prince William, the Prince of Wales and future king, stood before them with a gravity that silenced the chamber. What he was about to announce would send shockwaves around the world and reduce a former actress-turned-Duchess to tears thousands of miles away in Montecito. But how did we get here? How did a fairy tale wedding in 2018 spiral into a constitutional crisis that would require Parliament itself to intervene? The answer lies in a pattern of behavior so brazen, so calculated, that it threatened the very foundation of the British monarchy. This is the untold story of royal ambition, institutional betrayal, and the moment the Crown finally said, "Enough." The breaking point. What exactly happened on that fateful day in Parliament? According to sources close to the proceedings, the UK Parliament took the extraordinary step of voting to revoke Harry and Meghan's royal titles, effectively returning them to ordinary citizen status. Let that sink in for a moment. A sitting Parliament voting to strip royalty of their titles. When was the last time you heard of anything like this? When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle walked away from their royal duties in January 2020, the world saw it as a personal choice. A couple seeking independence, freedom from the suffocating constraints of royal life. But was that really the whole story? Over the years, something far more disturbing emerged. Their repeated use of royal styling, diplomatic privileges, and commercial leverage began to blur the lines between independent lives and crown representation. From exit agreements meant to separate them from official royal duty to HRH titles mysteriously showing up in private invitations, diplomatic paperwork, and merchandise campaigns, Harry and Meghan's actions didn't just defy expectations. They reshaped the entire constitutional debate over what it means to be royal in the 21st century. Think about this for a moment. Can you claim independence from an institution while simultaneously exploiting its symbols for personal gain? Can you reject the responsibilities while clinging to the privileges? These are the questions that haunted Buckingham Palace for years, and on January 29, 2026, those questions finally received their answer. The legal framework. While no official act of Parliament had previously stripped Harry or Meghan of any title, sources close to government discussions indicated that legislation such as the Removal of Titles Bill was under renewed consideration. This groundbreaking legislation would give either the monarch or a parliamentary committee the power to revoke royal titles from non-working royals. Harry and Meghan technically retained the Dukedom of Sussex and associated peerage titles granted by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018. Although they agreed with Buckingham Palace in January 2020, not to use his or her Royal Highness in official or commercial capacities. Reports as of 2025 suggested the couple had occasionally used or accepted informal HRH styling in private contexts. Can you imagine the audacity? Agreeing publicly to one thing while doing another behind closed doors? These tensions reached a boiling point when Meghan Markle allegedly used HRH in private written correspondence. Palace insiders observed that while private usage might not technically violate the exit agreement, it clearly contradicted its spirit. And in the world of constitutional monarchy, spirit matters as much as law. The unwritten rules, the trust between institution and individual, form the very bedrock of how the system functions. But what does spirit of an agreement mean when you're dealing with the British monarchy? It means everything. It means honor. It means keeping your word even when no one is watching. William's strategic vision. Behind the scenes, one man has been quietly orchestrating a revolution. Prince William, future King of England, watched his brother's departure with more than brotherly sadness. He saw an institutional threat that needed to be addressed not with emotion, but with strategy. Commentators and insiders increasingly portrayed William as determined to modernize the monarchy's practices, particularly around the symbolism of titles. Several analyses published in late 2025 suggested William intended to remove princely and HRH styles from all non-working royals once he becomes king, including Harry, Meghan, and potentially even their children through letters patent early in his reign. William understood something crucial that Harry and Meghan seem to have forgotten. Royal titles aren't accessories, they're responsibilities. He's watched his brother and sister-in-law exploit royal connections for Netflix deals, Spotify contracts, and global speaking tours. He's seen the confusion they've created among the public, the way ordinary people can no longer distinguish between official royal business and celebrity brand building. Unlike Prince Andrew, whose hereditary dukedom of York and peerage honors were formally removed under direct orders from King Charles III in 2025, no legal mechanism had yet been exercised against the Sussexes. But William knew something crucial. Public opinion would be the ultimate weapon in this battle. A YouGov poll conducted in January 2026 revealed that 61% of respondents believed Harry and Meghan should be stripped of all royal titles if they continue to operate as private figures outside royal control. In a constitutional monarchy, that's not just opinion, that's a mandate. The Megxit Agreement betrayed. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced their decision to step back from royal duties in January 2020, the transition agreement brokered personally by Queen Elizabeth II was meant to strike a delicate balance. The Queen tried to give them what they claimed to want while protecting what she had devoted her life to preserving. The terms were crystal clear. Harry and Meghan would no longer receive public funds. They would cease to undertake official royal duties on behalf of the Crown. And most significantly, they would no longer use the style His or Her Royal Highness in any official capacity. However, they would technically retain these titles along with their peerages. The palace allowed them to keep the HRH styles in name, but requested that they refrain from using them in public, official, or commercial settings. It wasn't a legal revocation. It was a mutual understanding based on trust. And over time, that trust began to crumble like ancient stonework exposed to the elements. The palace had bet on honor, on family loyalty, on the assumption that even in departure, Harry would remember who he was and what he represented. That bet would prove to be catastrophically misplaced. Archewell, the exploitation engine. By 2023, Archewell, the couple's media and charitable foundation, had grown into a sprawling entity that drew attention not only for its ambitions, but also for its strategic branding that often blurred the line between private citizen and royal emissary. Though Harry and Meghan claimed their charity work was entirely independent of the monarchy, public confusion persisted. Was that confusion accidental or intentional? When invitation after invitation listed them with royal styling. When event organizers introduced them as members of the British royal family, was this simply poor communication management? Or was it a deliberate strategy to have it both ways? The tipping point came in 2025. Meghan's correspondence with international charities and event organizers in Nigeria revealed the usage of HRH styling in private documents. Even more concerning, several diplomatic channels, including visa authorities and government contacts, had processed Meghan's travel arrangements under the assumption that she was still a working royal figure. A senior aide to Princess Anne released a statement in October 2025 that would become a rallying cry for reform. This is not about protocol, it's about principle, integrity, and the line between public service and personal gain. There can be no gray zone. You are either representing the crown with full transparency, or you are not. The internal investigation. Behind closed doors, tensions rose between Prince William and his younger brother. According to internal sources, William was deeply concerned that the Sussexes were creating a global image that implicitly relied on royal status, while explicitly claiming independence. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach, reportedly demanded an internal audit of all Sussex-linked philanthropic and commercial ventures. The objective was to identify every instance where royal affiliation may have been leveraged for financial gain or diplomatic privilege. The investigation examined three critical areas. First, event and speech engagements. Records showed that at least 14 invitations to Meghan and Harry had explicitly cited their royal titles in opening salutations or event materials, raising concerns that hosts were misled. Second, visa and travel documentation. The Nigeria visit in particular revealed troubling inconsistencies. Local government authorities had granted diplomatic-level privileges based on a perceived connection to the royal family, including enhanced visa access and elevated security arrangements. Had they traveled as private citizens, these protocols would not have applied. Third, charitable disbursements. Archewell's own grant-making records filed in both the US and UK lacked uniformity. Several beneficiaries listed Archewell's founders as Duke and Duchess in IRS and HMRC filings, triggering red flags with regulators. Princess Anne draws the line. By December 2025, Princess Anne demanded clarity in terms that couldn't be ignored. No one, no matter how famous or how hurt, has the right to act in a way that confuses the British people about who speaks for the crown, she declared during a rare appearance at Gatcombe Park. She had spent decades as one of the hardest-working royals, performing hundreds of engagements annually with zero fanfare. She doesn't do interviews. She doesn't write memoirs. She doesn't sell her story. She simply serves, year after year. So when someone like Princess Anne speaks, when she breaks her usual silence to make a public statement, the institution doesn't just listen, it acts. Simultaneously, Prince William began consulting with legal advisors and constitutional experts about invoking letters patent to limit the public usage of HRH and clarify royal title boundaries. William, as future sovereign, reportedly urged King Charles to prepare the necessary framework. The unprecedented joint statement. On the morning of January 23, 2026, Buckingham Palace released a statement unlike any in recent royal history. Signed jointly by Princess Anne and Prince William, it was measured yet unmistakably firm. The very fact that these two signed together sent an unmistakable message. This wasn't about personal grievance. This was about institutional survival. It was the first time in 2 generations that senior royals outside the reigning monarch publicly addressed a breach of trust from within the family. The opening paragraph wasted no time. As senior working members of the royal family, we are entrusted not only with tradition, but with the moral clarity expected by the British people. It is with deep regret that we acknowledge the sustained pattern of misrepresentation by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in their use of royal association, titles, and privileges, particularly through the Archewell Foundation and recent overseas engagements. The statement outlined 5 key declarations. The royal household does not recognize Archewell as a royal-endorsed charitable entity. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are no longer permitted to represent or speak on behalf of any Commonwealth-affiliated initiative. A formal request was submitted to King Charles III to initiate the process of title review under the Royal Marriages Act and Letters Patent. The royal family's official charitable representation would be consolidated under a new entity, the Crown Service Foundation, chaired jointly by Princess Catherine and Princess Anne. An audit recommendation was passed to UK regulators and US partners regarding Archewell's public disclosures, foreign donations, and use of HRH styling. Can you imagine receiving this statement if you were Harry and Meghan? The institution you'd spent years criticizing was now systematically dismantling your entire public identity. Public reaction erupts. Within hours, royal correspondence flooded the airwaves. Robert Hardman, one of the UK's leading royal historians, noted that this is not a personal attack. This is a public health warning about confusion, misrepresentation, and the misuse of royal capital in a globalized, media-saturated era. Social media erupted. Hashtags like "Protect the Crown" and "Royal Line Drawn" began trending, with public sentiment overwhelmingly in favor of the clarification. British veterans groups who had once supported Harry's Invictus Games released a polite but firm message backing the palace's move. Service and sacrifice must never be confused with celebrity. A petition calling for the full revocation of the Sussex titles reached over 300,000 signatures within 48 hours. Across both sides of the Atlantic, public figures, historians, and former diplomats weighed in, many voicing concern that Harry and Meghan's actions blurred the constitutional divide between private citizens and public servants. The Sussex response: silence. For 2 full days, no response came from the Sussex camp. Then, late in the evening of January 25th, Archewell quietly updated the bios on its website. The phrase "members of the British royal family" was removed. So was the line up supporting the Commonwealth. No apology, no clarification, just digital edits made in silence. But behind the scenes, the fallout was catastrophic. Netflix executives reportedly began reviewing language across all Sussex-tied content. A pending podcast episode meant to highlight Meghan's Nigerian trip was delayed indefinitely. Several PR firms distanced themselves from Archewell's global brand. Legal experts noted that the foundation's tax filings in the United States and charitable coordination documents in the UK would now face greater scrutiny. Once you lose the presumption of transparency, said a former Charity Commission advisor, donors start walking away fast. King Charles's quiet authority. Behind the public firmness of Princess Anne and Prince William's statement was a deeper alignment from King Charles III, a monarch known for his patience, now signaling quiet resolve. Those close to the king reported that the statement had his full knowledge and prior blessing. It was not abdication of duty, but a delegation of enforcement, one royal courtier confided. The king allowed the next generation to speak with the institutional voice. In the days following the Anne William letter, Charles remained deliberately silent, but his actions spoke volumes. He postponed a scheduled private phone call with Prince Harry, a conversation that had been set to discuss possible family reintegration. That call has never been rescheduled. Sources confirmed that private meetings took place at Clarence House and Windsor Castle between January 24th and 27th. The core topic wasn't just Harry and Meghan's conduct, it was the monarchy's long-term strategy in the age of personal branding, digital ambiguity, and influencer politics. The consensus was clear. The royal institution needed to reclaim clarity over who represents it and who does not. The Nigeria scandal exposed. The Nigerian tour was a turning point. Anne reportedly told the group, "Let's examine what really happened, because this is where the carefully constructed house of cards began to collapse." Originally marketed as a solidarity visit to women's education centers, the trip quickly escalated into controversy. Nigerian immigration officials confirmed that Harry and Meghan entered the country using diplomatic-level visas, typically reserved for official representatives of a sovereign government. But here's the bombshell. These visas were facilitated by a royal endorsement letter, later confirmed to have been signed not by any senior British official, but by an Archewell executive using royal letterhead from a 2020 event. An Archewell employee using royal letterhead to secure diplomatic privileges for a private trip. That's not a misunderstanding. That's deliberate misrepresentation. The letters cited ongoing Crown-adjacent projects and UK-Nigeria cultural healing, phrases deliberately designed to blur the lines between Archewell's private initiatives and royal statecraft. "We are treating this seriously," said an official at the UK Home Office. It appears that royal prestige was weaponized to access privileges intended for sovereign diplomacy. The Crown Service Foundation. In response, the Crown Service Foundation was launched quietly on January 29, 2026. Chaired jointly by Princess Catherine and Princess Anne, the foundation consolidated royal charitable efforts. The choice of leaders was deliberate. Catherine, beloved for her grace and dedication. Anne, respected for her tireless work ethic. The mission pillars addressed the very causes Archewell had tried to claim: children's welfare and education, veteran mental health, sustainable development and climate resilience, Commonwealth solidarity projects. What made this initiative stand out was its governance model. All projects are audited annually, include independent oversight boards, and ban the use of personal titles or HRH status in external branding. "We are not content creators," Catherine said during the closed-door launch event. "We are public servants, and every child, every veteran, every Commonwealth partner we meet deserves the full weight of our sincerity." Initial reception was overwhelmingly positive. A poll revealed that 72% of Britons supported Anne and William's public statement. 81% said Princess Catherine was the most trusted royal voice in public charity. The Archewell collapse. As the Crown Service Foundation soared, Archewell's decline accelerated. 3 major sponsors quietly withdrew funding by the end of January. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's request for a formal audience with King Charles remained unanswered. According to insiders, his tone had shifted from assertive to increasingly desperate. Meghan's team reportedly attempted to pitch a new docuseries to Amazon Prime, framing it as a global citizen's quest for justice. It was rejected. "The brand fatigue is real," said one Hollywood agent. "They're losing credibility on both sides of the Atlantic." The Joint Regulatory Audit. In a historic first. The Joint Regulatory Audit. In a historic first, the Charity Commission for England and Wales, in coordination with the Internal Revenue Service, launched a joint regulatory audit of Archewell. The trigger was a confidential evidence packet submitted by the royal household's legal advisory team. Contained within were devastating revelations. Email correspondence showing Meghan's team billing Archewell-sponsored travel as royal engagements in official visa documentation. Internal Archewell memos referencing H.R.H. Meghan's Royal Tour Africa, a document marked Fundraising Strategy Q for 2025 that described plans to leverage Meghan's royal optics for celebrity endorsements, donor dinners, and digital campaigns. One line, highlighted in red ink by Royal Counsel, read, "Use residual HRH brand value to position Archewell as the sole inheritor of Diana's humanitarian legacy." When Princess Catherine was informed of this phrasing, she reportedly responded, "We do not inherit legacy through branding. We carry it through action." The title, Suspension. A confidential memo was circulated within the royal household, signed jointly by Princess Anne and Prince Edward. The recommendation was stark: suspend the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles pending the outcome of the audit. "We are guardians of the crown, not its influencers," the memo read. To allow title holders to operate under the guise of royal trust while defying royal duty is to erode the crown from within. Initially, Prince Harry responded with fury. He contacted a BBC journalist privately, claiming, "They're trying to erase us because we built something that works." After word of the title suspension memo leaked, Harry cancelled all press appearances and instructed his legal team to request a confidential mediation session with the Privy Council. Meghan Markle has gone noticeably silent since the audit began. Her official Instagram account hasn't posted since January 29th. Sources within her communications team say she is re-evaluating forward-facing roles. An agent familiar with Meghan's brand admitted the royal connection was the core asset. If that goes, she's left with a personal story that's been told too many times and believed less and less. Harry's desperation. After word of the title suspension memo leaked to the press, Harry reportedly cancelled all press appearances and instructed his legal team to request a confidential mediation session with the Privy Council. The prince, who had been so confident in his California life, who had seemed so certain of his choice, was now desperately seeking a way back. Insiders say Harry is now facing intense pressure from his U.S. legal advisors, many of whom fear that continued entanglement with royal branding could trigger IRS revocation of Archewell's 501c3 status, effectively ending the foundation entirely. The legal advice was clear: distance yourself from the royal connection now, or face the possibility of the IRS determining that the organization was never truly charitable, but rather a vehicle for personal enrichment. His lawyers have requested to negotiate separation terms, hinting that Harry may be willing to relinquish his title voluntarily in exchange for a clear line between Archewell and the monarchy. Voluntary relinquishment. Think about that phrase. The man who was born a prince, who served his country in Afghanistan, who walked behind his mother's coffin as the world watched, now considering giving up his title just to save a charitable foundation that's under investigation. How did it come to this? How did the spare to the heir, the once beloved prince who embodied his mother's common touch and his military service's dignity, end up in such a desperate position? Meghan's silence and Hollywood's rejection. Meghan Markle, once the vocal figurehead of Archewell's vision, has gone noticeably silent since the audit began. Her official Instagram account hasn't posted since January 29th, an eternity in the world of social media influence. Sources within her communications team say she is re-evaluating forward-facing roles, which is corporate speak for hiding until the storm passes. Hollywood insiders report that several production partners, especially those linked to Netflix and Spotify, have paused all projects pending legal clearance from Archewell. The entertainment industry, for all its talk of artistic freedom and speaking truth to power, is ultimately risk-averse when it comes to legal liability and brand damage. An agent familiar with Meghan's brand admitted something that must have been devastating to hear. The royal connection was the core asset. If that goes, she's left with a personal story that's been told too many times and believed less and less. The truth hurts, doesn't it? The acting career hadn't reached these heights. Cable television success as a supporting character on a legal drama doesn't make you globally famous. The lifestyle blog didn't make her a household name. The royal wedding did. And now, without that connection, what's left? What does Meghan bring to the table that hundreds of other celebrity activists and former actresses don't? The final declaration. Then came the moment the world had been waiting for. Buckingham Palace released a statement of record following an extensive independent audit and cross-border review of branding, financial compliance, and public representation. Their Majesties the King and Council hereby declare that the use of the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex and any related royal styling or association shall be suspended indefinitely. Effective immediately, Harry and Meghan were no longer permitted to refer to themselves as royal representatives or use HRH, Sussex, or any related insignia. The official audit report confirmed multiple violations. Archewell had misrepresented donor funds through unreported consulting fees tied to Meghan's personal brand advisors. Multiple international travel events were wrongly classified as humanitarian missions when they were actually sponsored content negotiations. Most damning, the report cited clear violations of Section 4958 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code, which governs private inurement. The IRS had frozen Archewell's accounts. The UK's Charity Commission had launched proceedings to deregister Archewell UK as a recognized charitable entity. The audit findings. The official audit report, compiled by a joint UK-US commission and reviewed by the Charity Commission and IRS, was released within the hour, and its findings were damning. It confirmed multiple violations that had already surfaced in leaks and internal royal investigation documents. Archewell had misrepresented donor funds through unreported consulting fees tied to Meghan's personal brand advisors. Money that donors thought was going to charitable causes was actually paying for Meghan's personal team. Multiple international travel events were wrongly classified as humanitarian missions when they were actually sponsored content negotiations or luxury appearances. The line between charity work and personal enrichment had been deliberately blurred. At least 2 charity initiatives billed as Crown-aligned were found to be personal ventures launched to secure influencer contracts. Most damning of all, the report cited clear violations of Section 4958 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code, which governs private inurement, whereby non-profit insiders benefit unduly from their organization's assets. This wasn't just unethical, this was potentially illegal. The IRS had frozen Archewell's accounts pending a full financial review. The UK's Charity Commission had launched proceedings to deregister Archewell UK as a recognized charitable entity. Within hours, the organization that Harry and Meghan had built as their post-royal legacy was effectively defunct. The King's signature. While King Charles III did not speak publicly, a palace aide confirmed to The Times that the final decision bore his signature, that this action had been taken with the full authority of the Crown. The King wanted to allow every opportunity for discretion and correction, but when institutional abuse of trust is evident, the Crown must act. This was a matter of precedent, not punishment. Privately, Charles is said to have confided to Queen Camilla and Princess Anne, a sentiment that captured his profound disappointment. What they borrowed, they could have earned, but they chose shortcuts. That is not the Windsor way. Those words encapsulate everything, don't they? The royal family would have welcomed them back with genuine service. The door was never completely closed. Charles, who knows what it's like to be misunderstood and criticized, who spent years being vilified in the press, would have forgiven almost anything. But service requires humility. It requires sacrifice. It requires putting the institution before yourself. And that was something Harry and Meghan were unwilling or unable to do. They wanted the prestige without the constraint, the platform without the duty, the privilege without the responsibility. The Royal Humanitarian Charter. As the Sussex titles were erased from royal registers, as centuries of precedent were invoked to correct what was seen as a fundamental breach of trust, Princess Anne and Princess Catherine stood side by side at Windsor Guildhall to unveil a new Crown initiative that would define the future of royal service. The Royal Humanitarian Charter of 2026 represented more than just a response to Harry and Meghan. It was a comprehensive reimagining of how the monarchy would operate in the modern world. The initiative formalized clear royal representation guidelines and established a new royal-led body titled the Crown Service Alliance, a globally recognized framework through which legitimate royal engagements are coordinated, tracked, and audited in real time. Never again would there be ambiguity about who speaks for the Crown and who doesn't. Anne, in her address, emphasized the principle that would guide the new era. The privilege of public trust is not granted by name nor inherited by marriage. It is earned hour by hour, action by action. Catherine added words that seemed aimed directly at her absent sister-in-law. This charter is not about exclusion. It is about integrity. It is a promise to every child, every widow, every struggling voice we represent, that our service to them will never be used as a stepping stone to personal fame. The public reception was overwhelming. Thousands gathered outside the palace, holding signs that read, "Real royals serve and William and Catherine. Trust restored." This wasn't just support for specific individuals. This was the British people affirming what they wanted their monarchy to be. The corporate exodus. Social media lit up across the globe. Royal integrity trended in 34 countries as people from every corner of the world weighed in on what had happened. Within 48 hours, the corporate world delivered its verdict, and it was brutal. Netflix announced it was formally ending its development slate with Meghan Markle, citing strategic redirection following reputational review. The streaming giant that had paid millions for the privilege of the Sussex story was cutting its losses. Spotify released a short statement confirming that all archetypes-related intellectual property had reverted to the platform. The podcast that was supposed to be Meghan's voice in the cultural conversation was over. U.S. immigration authorities confirmed that Harry's green card status was under reassessment following questions about financial disclosures and tax residency inconsistencies tied to Archewell. Even his right to remain in America was now in question. Meghan's legal team formally withdrew a pending trademark application for Archewell Royal, signaling the end of their branding campaign tied to any royal identity. The very name they had fought to protect was now a liability. Sources close to Meghan say she is now in crisis, talks with her business managers, while Harry is reportedly isolated, confused, and unsure where to go next. The couple who had seemed so confident in their path, who had walked away from the palace with their heads high, were now facing the collapse of everything they'd built. According to one Montecito neighbor, their estate is quiet. The Range Rover hasn't moved. It's like they've vanished overnight. The meaning of it all. For the royal family, this was never about vengeance. It was about defending centuries of service-based legacy from modern manipulation, about protecting an institution that has survived far greater threats than one wayward prince and his ambitious wife. Princess Anne summarized the moment best during her final remarks at the Windsor event. "If we are to be called royals, let it be for the duty we perform, not the titles we claim. Let it be for how we serve, not how we sell." And so ended a chapter, not with a war of words, but with a strategic, irrevocable severance. The crown stood, strengthened by its willingness to defend its principles. The pretenders fell, victims of their own miscalculation, and a new era of authentic royal service had begun, one where titles mean responsibility rather than opportunity. But what about Meghan? Reports from sources close to the situation describe her as devastated, in tears, and unable to process the finality of the decision. The woman who once graced the cover of Vogue, who married into the most famous family in the world, who thought she could rewrite the rules of monarchy, reduced to silence in a Montecito mansion while the institution she challenged moves forward without her. Harry, meanwhile, faces an impossible choice between his wife and his family, between his California life and his British heritage, between his commercial ventures and his royal legacy. The sad truth? He may have already lost both. So what do you think? Was the royal family right to strip Harry and Meghan of their titles? Or did they go too far? Should titles be tied to service, or are they a birthright that can never be revoked? How would you feel if you were Harry, watching everything you were born into slip away? And what about Meghan? Is she a victim of an archaic institution, or the architect of her own downfall? The debate will rage on, but one thing is certain. January 29th, 2026 will be remembered as the day the monarchy drew a line in the sand, the day the crown said enough is enough, the day Prince William stood in Parliament and announced the end of Harry and Meghan's royal story. History will judge whether this was justice or tragedy. But for now, the titles are gone, the privileges revoked, and somewhere in California, a duchess who is no longer a duchess wipes away tears, wondering how a fairy tale turned into a constitutional crisis. This is the story they didn't want you to know. This is the moment everything changed. And this is just the beginning of what promises to be the most dramatic chapter in modern royal history. What happens next? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear: the crown endures, and those who challenge it, they fall.